Hello everyone, Revan619 here. Today I'm going to be ranking the companion tier list, and it's going to be designed for an unfair Grimdark run. This is mostly going to be to combat and to cover skills that you're going to need across the party, and also what itemization is available. There are some companions that might seem more useful, but they are heavily reliant on stuff that you don't get till later, so they're not really ones I'd focus on. Yes, I'm going to include the secret companions, but we should preface right at the start that you only really have them for 36 minutes unless you're really taking your time reading the text in Act 5. So I'm going to do this in the order of what you actually meet and recruit companions. Starting up first with Abelard. Abelard we meet in Act 1. He is a warrior and he is a Navy officer. With the Navy officer buffs, he is incredibly powerful. A lot of people always considered non-psyker builds to be pretty meh before 1.5, but with the Origin rework, there's actually a reason to actually take the other Origins. And we've got to the point where Abelard is fantastic in all of his secondary archetypes, and because he can use Invigorating Resolve, Malpain Shroud, he's going to actually be one of your most consistent and highest damage companions with gear as you move through the game. So he is definitely going to be one of your best people to keep in your party, and he's probably someone that you're going to use for the majority of it, unless you're going to go for very specific playstyles that require you to respec him. You're probably going to be covering athletics and carouse with him, so he is very useful for getting that, but you don't really see many carouse checks in game, and normally it'll be Rogue Trader specific when you actually do get those checks. Next up, we have Idira. Now, Idira has been confirmed by the devs with their Fixit 1.5 to be the only psyker that can't pass demonic incursion perils with warp buffer, meaning she's designed to always explode and die, and she can do it on any power. Regular sanctioned psykers, which includes Heinrix and player-made ones, they can pass demonic incursions with warp buffer, and even if you use Shimmering Emulsion to get +1 to psi rating, that 30% increase to Perils of the Warp only counts at high veil and when using major powers. So obviously, Idira's pretty low tier. She's actually the most risky companion to use because she can just die in sudden demons, and she can end your unfair Grimdark run almost immediately just by trying to use a very basic buff that would be absolutely no issue on any other form of psyker. Next up, we have Argenta. Argenta has consistently been one of the greatest damage dealers from launch until now, and in patch 1.4 she got a unique item that doubles her damage against Xenos, which is the majority of endgame enemies, and now with the Priest reworks, yeah, she's just insane. Even her unique power armor in Act 5, insane. If you use her for light guns, also insane, but she's primarily a heavy gunner user, and she's going to be consistently probably one of the highest damage companions you have because she doesn't require any finesse to play. You just click rapid fire and you just fire that improved heavy bolter and have insane rate of fire. So yeah, she's always going to be fantastic to have in the party. Next up, we have Cassia. Cassia is a unique navigator. So being a navigator, she has a whole bunch of powerful buffs and damage. No, she is not a damage killer. It brings me no amount of tedium to see that everyone say that she's an OP damage dealer, but what she is good at is being able to not only buff the party, but also pick off some trash mobs. Her Lidless Stare is an AoE damage and as well as a stun. There are talents that you can take that you can stack it up, but unless you're just using a devastating stuff or even going into Overseer, you're only ever going to have 2 attacks, but you can build it to 3. It's very good. If you put the Sororitas boots on her in Act 2 and you can kill 5 trash mobs, which you should be able to do by expanding pretty much all of your AP by using 3 to 4 just to get those 2 little stairs. When you kill 5 trash enemies, that will trigger Finest Hour. End of Act 2, when you get access to the Black Signet Ring of the Inquisition, you don't need to do that. You can heavily focus on buffs. And if you give her something like Decisive Response, she can use both officer buffs, probably bring it down, and then she can obviously use her Navigator buffs, which makes her insanely strong and powerful for the team. So yes, again, with Argenta right up there in the top tier for just being OP. The next one we come across is Cabela. There was a big meme for ages saying that everyone's nerfed, and you sometimes see the weird screechers that still say that she was nerfed. She was not nerfed. She was massively buffed in 1.5. Now, she is definitely OP, but there is something you need to caveat with her, because with the new Drukhari weapons and finesse, yeah, her damage is insane. The fact that she can generate attacks on kills is insane. The fact that you can use acrobatic archery to repeat all your death and buffs is insane. The fact that you can arm strip with grand performance and defaults is insane. The only thing that you need to worry about is in Act 5, the exclusive enemies for that last 36 minutes of the game are immune to toxin and bleed. So that means you really need to have Dogmatic 2 to get any use out of her. And that's if you're going Executioner. If you go into any of the other builds, which are all viable, Master Tactician, Assassin, and even going into Arc Militant, they're all very viable. Those ones, those setups are just best. They're not OP, but her Executioner is definitely her OP. Next, we're going to come up to Pascal. Pascal's an Operative. Operative is bottom 1 when it comes to archetypes in the game. But being bottom 1 for the archetypes isn't too bad when you consider that he got very unique plasma abilities and a lot of unique plasma buffs. Whilst he won't be able to slow load clear encounters, he will do incredibly high damage. He will be able to support the team, and he will also be able to increase the base damage of the team. He'll cover tech use and logic. So yes, I actually say that with the changes to plasma weapons, yes, Pascal is in best. If you go with arc rifles, Overseer, he'll drop down to usable. But if you're going bounty hunter plasma, definitely best. Same with Abelard. If you have him as a Arc Militant, up here in best. If you change him to Assassin or Vanguard, he will drop down to here. So do keep that in mind, that builds do matter when it comes to that. Same with Argenta. This is as an Arc Militant. You change her to a Master Tactician, bam, right down to here. But as long as you keep her as an Arc Militant, she's going to stay up here. Same with Cassia, Grand Strategist, yep. But if you drop her off from Grand Strategist to anything else, she'll drop down to here. Same with Cabela. If you move her off Executioner, she'll drop down to here. But keeping up with Executioner will keep her up here right in the top. Next, we move on to Heinrix. Heinrix has seen some incredible buffs in both DLC 1 and DLC 2. He is very viable to be a Vanguard. He is very viable to be an Overseer, both as a tank and a buffer. With Spirit Drape, he has infinite access to buffs that are all have absolute no risk, and he's the highest possible damage dealing companion at the same time. He can literally do everything. Now, because of the changes in Act 5, it's very debatable if you want him here or here. The only reason that I would put Heinrix below Argenta is Argenta will straight up just do more damage, but Heinrix can do more damage. If you were to edit an enemy to 5 million HP, Heinrix would vastly out-damage Argenta. However, there's no enemy with enough HP for him to stack up his damage to those godly levels. So that's why I would say that he's actually a step below Argenta, because her just raw damage is always going to beat what he can do. And though he will one-turn encounters a little bit easier because of Daring Breach, he's just not as strong as her. So you're going to definitely want to have both of them on the team, but you can argue for cases for which way this should be. But because Heinrix is going to be more gear reliant, he needs Void Veteran Boots to get attack economy on Executioner. He needs Warp Surge Brooch to get attack economy. You need to find ways to get him to have movement. And again, which is where Void Veteran Boots come in, or Inertia Boots early on. Argenta can also use those, so Argenta can use the Inertia Boots to still stack up infinite MP to be moving around the battle and clearing it. So yes, it's a very tight race between those two. The only reason that he beats out Cabela is because he's a psyker. Psykers are still incredibly OP. You can build him for buffing, or you can build him for offense, and you can have a little bit of mix of the other in it. Even as a pure AoE buffer using Overseer, you can still stack his armor to the moon, and he will be your tankiest character that you have. Moving on to Jay. Jay is absolutely fantastic, and it's very hard to know where to put her, so I'm going to go for here because she's also an officer. Jay is got her cold trader acumen fixed, so she is probably one of the best skill check coverers in the game. If you use her, you'll probably want to drop Pascal, and you want to focus on tech use, but Jay can be an incredibly powerful gunslinger. She can be an incredibly powerful Overseer, and she can also be a very useful Grand Strategist, though not as good as Cassia. The only thing that's stopping Jay from being OP, because she has the best origin in the game, is the fact that she doesn't have decisive response. Her default build is what holds her back. If the devs would change her to have decisive response and to have air authority, she would be OP. But unfortunately, because they don't, I still put her usability below Abelard, because you don't need a second officer. If you just have Cassia, that's all you need. You don't need two officers. And so yeah, I would say that's below. And the only reason, again, that's above Pascal is the fact that being able to use Bring It Down and Finest Hour, and now that she's got the buff Finest Hour, that does make her better than Pascal, but I actually prefer to use Pascal over Jay. Next, we move on to Yrliet. Yrliet saw some really strong buffs that make her Bounty Hunter setup a lot stronger in Act 2. Her Assassin is still barely usable, but it's better than it was. But she's still just an operative. She's actually probably the weakest damage companion in the game. She's not unusable, but she's nothing fantastic, and she incredibly drops off in Act 3 and Act 4. By Act 5, you just will barely use her. Next, we move on to DLC 2 Companion Solomon. Yes, a Vigilant Shotgun user is probably one of the best builds in the game. However, Solomon's base build does not come with dash, so without dash he suffers from horrendous mobility issues and he often gets stuck. They fixed him to come at level 19 rather than level 26, so he is better than he was before, but unfortunately there's no reason to ever bring him in the party over Argenta because they cover the same skill checks. Solomon has massive movement issues, but items like heavy breacher boots that you would use to generate movement on his attacks are actually bugged. And you wouldn't want to give the inertia boots to Solomon over Argenta or Heinrix or even Cabela. So because of his movement issues, whilst he is usable, he's not someone I'd recommend. I wouldn't recommend either of these two for the party because they're just worse than someone else that fills the same role. Coming in with some changes that we are seeing in DLC 2 and patch 1.5, Ulfar has had his entire build reworked. So the developers actually changed a lot of his dead talents that I said there is no reason to have on Ulfar, and they changed it. They didn't go with all of my suggestions, but they fixed it a lot. They also added some incredibly powerful armor to Act 4, which makes him incredibly viable for map clearing. And they gave him some really strong weapons. The only issue of his weapons is you can't use them until Act 5 when the game's over. But honestly, Ulfar's really been thrown up there. The fact that his ranged attacks can reset his kicks, and you've got many ways to generate infinite movement from kick, especially with slicing symbol. Yeah, whenever I get Ulfar now, I just replace Abelard from the party. Yes, Abelard uses Malpain Shroud. Malpain Shroud is the only thing that keeps him relevant, and the offhand attacks are a fantastic boon, and especially early game having his Bracer Impact cover the party. Once you recruit Ulfar, there's no reason really to keep Abelard about, because Ulfar will replace his corrals and his athletic checks, but he'll also bring in demolitions and awareness. So he just covers more, he's stronger. Yes, his damage potential in some areas is worse, but stuff with like his Annihilating Astartes Bolter or his Storm Bolter, he can actually pump out a lot more damage a lot more quickly than Abelard, and he will actually clear solo Daybreak much easier than Abelard will. So yeah, and the thing is, Abelard does directly compete with equipment for Heinrix, and there's no reason to load it all out onto Abelard when Heinrix just uses its better, and you can pair him and Ulfar together, and you can even have them cover separate roles. Ulfar can act as your HP tank, whilst you then have your main melee damage be Heinrix, and then your main range damage be Argenta, and Ulfar will be a good mixed attacker between the two. So they'll come together very, very nicely. Now, next we're going to look at Marazhai. So Marazhai, or as some people like to call him Marazhai or Marzipan, whatever it is, got Sharing Strikes fixed. He's always consistently, since launch, been an incredibly powerful companion, but people just haven't known how his build works, so they've just always overlooked him. Marazhai can be built for the Death Aura. The Death Aura basically allows you to use Malign Influence with his Assassin Lethality to just insta-kill the map by walking around. He can then destroy and map clear everything with no buffs just from bring it down, just by walking and generating movement, which you can do a Shriftshroud Cloak, you can do a Slicing Symbol and Breakthrough, and many other things. He's actually probably considered to be OP, because the thing is, he just kills everything. When you get him for the Ymira's fight, he can stack his armor to 15,000% in round 1. He can stack his dodge to over 600% by using bleed daggers and then hitting them with the Drukhari Claves, so he'll turn that to dodge. As if you've watched my Marazhai build video, you'll see that turn 1 from the first encounter you get him, you can have 15,000% armor, and you can have almost infinite dodge. He is insanely powerful. Yeah, he's just massively underrepresented because people didn't take the time to work out how his builds work. With the new Drukhari items, he's also incredibly powerful. He's had incredibly strong buffs with finesse. And yeah, he's just unkillable, and he can kill the map by just walking around. He's not as good as Cabela because of Cabela's hypermobility from Blade Dancer, but he is definitely stronger than her, that's for sure. He's just unkillable, and eventually, because of his Death Aura, he will be able to kill anything. He does have limited access to stuff like he can't use Rock Swords. If he could use Rock Swords, he would be very strong, but he doesn't quite have that. Alright, so moving on to the Act 5 Secret Companions. As I said at the start of the video, you have access to all of these guys for 36 minutes, if not less, and only more if you really take your time to read everything. Their builds aren't bad. So obviously, you get Caligos if you go the Heretic path, and he's actually a warrior arch militant, which It's just strong. It's basically but Abelard, but without Navy officer. So because of his mobility, he is actually very strong and usable. The only issue is his build does come preset, but by the time you recruit him, you're probably level 50 plus. So you're going to actually have a complete endgame build. But you wouldn't really put him over anyone in the party because, like I said, he's just a weaker Abelard. So yeah, it's still very, very strong, but he's just obviously a weaker version of a companion that you have for 140 hours and you only have him for 36 minutes. Coming in to what you'll see with Chorda. Chorda is very interesting because she benefits from all the priest buff, but they didn't change her base build, but she's also a master tactician. She's actually one of the strongest companions. Like, it is incredibly good. She even has the viable melt pistol. So she has very strong melt pistol. She's very strong for area attack. She's very strong for master tactician. And you can actually build her into a sort of a mixed attacker with melter area attacks and burst pistols. Because of the new priest update, yeah, she's incredibly strong. Like, you throw in the team of Argenta, they both stack up Litany of Hatred together, so they're both very, 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 very powerful. So, yeah, she's going to be very strong when you have her at the end of the game, and if you are losing companions, having Caligos come in is very helpful. If you go the Iconoclast route and you get access to Chorda, she will be helpful. And again, she is very strong, but there's no point trying to hope for them because they come in so late. And unless DLC 3 and 4 really expand Act 4 and 5, you probably won't use them. Last of all, we're going to talk about Yrliet. Hot trash. Worst companion in the game, has no gear. His build is terrible. He's an officer master tactician that, again, has no gear, but the only weapons he can use are single target hit and single target shot. To make master tactician viable, you need to use rate of fire weapons. He can't do that. So he's just infinitely worse than Jay. He's infinitely worse than what you can build as a commissar. He's infinitely worse than what you can build as a Astra Militarium commander. I didn't think I'd ever say it, but yes, he's a trash officer. But yes, this is going to be what it is. So your party, when you get them, you're most likely going to have Abelard for the majority of the game until you get to Heinrix, and then you might switch them out or you might pair them up. But you'll have to work out how to cover skills because obviously Carouse and Athletics are going to be the two that these two do want to cover. But you will end up replacing Abelard with Ulfar because Ulfar covers more and he does more and he map clears easier and he's not competing with gear with Heinrix, and Heinrix is the best companion to use the gear. So you're essentially just weakening what Heinrix could be by using Abelard, but they're still both very usable. You'll want to, once you get Cassia, to always keep her in the party and make sure she's a grand strategist. That is actually your safety net. Just having her in the party as a grand strategist is the secret to success. Argenta is going to join to cover awareness and demolitions, and she never stops being the strongest companion. Like I said, when it just comes to turn one-ing, she'll actually do more than Heinrix, because Heinrix needs to multi-attack to build up his attack, so he's going to be heavily reliant on rock swords. However, because Argenta can just kill so quickly and easily without having to stack up damage, yes, if you stuff like Bloody Pact with psyker buffs, Heinrix will actually outdamage her, and once you have access to Dare and Breach, it'll be easier for him to map clear. But you can just give Argenta the inertia boots and she'll map clear anyway, and she'll do very high consistent damage in both area and beams with her burst fire. So yeah, I would actually say that to keep her above there, but you will use both of them in the party. Cabela can cover Medicaid, and you'll probably either want to do Demolition or Awareness, but that does mean that it will overlap with other companions, so you maybe might not want to keep her in the party. But she is incredibly strong, and she will guarantee to win. And if you use the Face in the End version, the only time Cabela is risky is at the start of Act 1 when you do the Rykard Star Pot, because the loss of dodge that you can get on Death from Above, the fact that you can get one shot by these enemies, they do 45 plus damage to your squishy 20 HP allies. She could die there, but if you take Face in the End, you can actually build her into a pseudo Death World build. So you can trauma stack a little bit, though you shouldn't aim to do it, but it is something you can cover with it. She will be able to one-turn some of the hardest encounters, as you've seen in my build videos for her. So yes, you might want to bring her in and bring her out, but you definitely want either Pascal or Jay on the team to cover up skill checks. Pascal will do some very good damage, and because of the way his overcharge works, when you shoot and when you reload, both of them will give you 10% extra damage. So because you now have extra attacks, if you use Claim the Bounty to shoot, reload, use claim the bounty again, because it can let you use it twice, and then you reload again, so you've taken those 2 attacks there, and then you use his regular extra attack, then yeah, that's 5. That's 3 attacks there. Then you reload again, so that gives you 6 boosts, and then you can take another shot if you use Hunter's Ambush, so you can then reload again. So that's 80% boost already. So it's incredibly powerful. He can also use joint analysis to really help the party. I don't really like tactical analysis because yeah, the problem is extra turns exploits still don't work. So Pascal does not benefit from getting extra turns. So he's much better as a damage support and obviously getting things in. Some people like to use him as grand strategist, but honestly, if you're using him as grand strategist, I would drop him down to here, but keeping him as bounty hunter up here. So yeah, it's him or Jay. Jay, again, incredibly strong, incredibly useful. You could argue that because of her not being able to attack and just being a second officer, you could actually put Jay here and say that, well, if she had decisive response, she would probably be like here, but somewhere either side of Cassia. But because she doesn't have decisive response and air of authority, yeah, it probably makes sense to have her down here. And yeah, so you'll keep one of these 2 for pretty much the majority of the game. There's no reason to use Solomon over Cabela or even Argenta. There's no reason to use Yrliet over literally anyone. She's just worse than Pascal in all ways. She can't cover tech checks because she has low int. You probably don't want her covering demolitions because she's not got the damage of what Argenta or Cabela has, and she's just, even compared to Solomon, she's just not as good. Her damage drops off heavily after Act 2, and if you're trying to use her, you're pretty much using a challenge run. She's not risky to use and she's not unusable to use, but she's just not very good. She doesn't really stand out. When it comes down to Idira, like I said, by design, she is the only companion that will suck and die just because you used a basic power. Other psykers don't even have that risk, and at major powers at High Veil, they can use Warp Buffer to pass demonic incursions to kill other enemies and bosses. Idira by design can't do that. So it wasn't a bug, it was just by design. Heinrix can. He can just spam buffs until the cows come home as an using Spirit Drape as an overseer of Cyberraven. And yeah, there's no negative. But yeah, Idira has that negative. So she's forever on the bench for me. Since the developers said that they're not going to fix that bug because they didn't want it to be too OP, but regular psykers don't have that. Yeah, all they said was don't use her. And as for Yrliet, hot trash. No gear, no synergy with the gear, with the weapons he has for his setup. His ability to summon demons is incredibly weak because the demons he summons suck. Yeah, I just wouldn't use him. I'd rather have an empty slot than use Yrliet. He's just, yeah, he's not good at all. But that's going to cover everything. Let me know your thoughts below. And no, this wasn't for story. This was for actually winning the game. But actually, when it comes to story, I still like all this top pro. Like my dogmatic boys, yeah, they post up. But that's all I've got to say. Thanks for stopping by. Revan out. Have a good one.